All right, our last talk this morning is Stan Thomas, and he's with the Oregon Department of Emergency Management.
All right, it's good to be here. I'm 629 days away from retirement, and this has proved why. I have to navigate an iPad because I couldn't plug in my computer, and I had to get my parking pass on my iPhone about 10 minutes ago, so no kiosks. So I'm learning. Stan Thomas, I'm with Oregon Department of Emergency Management. I'm the Division Director for Mitigation and Recovery. And so a lot of people that I meet, like Mr. Burns and other folks, are on our worst days. But then we become very good friends as we try to rebuild Oregon back over time. I'm here to talk a little bit about the 2020 wildfires and the challenges that we ran into after the 2020 wildfires and the challenges we are faced with today, particularly with how we build back communities where the landscape has changed, the vegetation is gone, debris flows are going to be much more common in certain areas. And when you think about the beautiful community of Detroit Lake, Oregon, some of those properties were built on years and years ago. We know a lot more than we knew back then. And how does that impact that community, the economic recovery, and most importantly, the people that own those properties that now are identified right smack in the middle of a debris flow, and how does that impact their insurance? The questions go on and on and on. I'm going to try to navigate. I do have my own iPad, so this might move slow because it's trying to load some GIS work. I'm going to try to get to a storyboard on the 2020 wildfires and just talk a little bit about the impacts and then close out with some thoughts and some work that we're doing. So far, so good. And by the way, my friends at ODOT, not only do they do a fantastic job of keeping the mountain passes clear, because I live in Central Oregon, and just taking care of the roads, they also, in 2020 and 2021, became the largest logging contractor in the state of Oregon, removing debris fields or hazard trees. All right, let's see if I can. Okay, I'll run through this just a little bit. And if you're not aware, if you go to the Oregon Department of Emergency Management's website and you want to get information about disasters or current information, we've got dashboards that tell you how many drought declarations, how many earthquakes we've had, how many landslides, all of that good stuff. We keep track of that on a running order. After disasters, we put these storyboards together. So the wildfire, it was at the time one of the largest in the country. We torched what I call the I-5 corridor, burnt down a lot of acreage, a lot of towns. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit to this was the state. 21 wildfires is a misnomer. We had hundreds of small wildfires, but we had burned over 1 million acres. If you can see, tap anywhere to interact. I just don't want that there. As you see, those were the main fires. If you look at the Lions Head and Beachy Creek fire, you can see Lions Head very clearly. Beachy Creek is right in front of that. Those fires took off, and one of them moved about 55 miles in 2 days. So all of the response operations had nothing to do with fire suppression. It had everything to do with just evacuating people. And I don't know, is there anybody here that was directly impacted by those wildfires that lived through it? Yeah, so it was horrific. At one point in time, we were looking at evacuating Clackamas County, the entire population of Clackamas County. And there was one time where I was standing outside of our emergency coordination center at 2 p.m. The sky looked like you were on Mars. And we were wondering how much of Marion County was going to be impacted and how much of Salem, because it was just moving so fast. So let me see if I can. All right. Looks like I'm stuck on this. Is there a way to go backwards? I think I got it. The transportation impacts, I-5 was closed. Most of the roads going into the mountains were closed. ODOT was heavy at work. I will never forget the moment Mac Lind from ODOT and Brian Bowling from DEQ showed up, and we were dealing with roads, hazard trees, and household hazardous waste. And they were summoned to the Emergency Coordination Center. They walked into my office, and they both looked at me, and they said, "What are we here for?" And I said, "You're here for a long time," because we're not going anywhere for a while. Some of the things that came out of it was we were able, through what we call direct federal assistance with our FEMA friends, we were able to build at a very small price the Emergency Threat and Response Team, ETART. Similar to BEAR, where BEAR comes in and they do the studies post-fire on federal lands. The federal government and those teams that came in helped us build our own teams so we could do it on state land. And I think we had 5 or 6 really good reports that became the foundation of where we went and some of the work that Dogami did. But the transportation impacts were pretty significant. The local impacts, we burnt down Otis, Talent, Phoenix, Detroit, parts of Mill City, Blue River. And Blue River was probably one of the hardest hit communities and one of our biggest challenges, which is still a challenge today, on getting reconstruction moving up in Blue River. I want to go down to Jackson County. Jackson County was the hardest hit as far as loss of homes. The difference being, while they lost more homes and most of it was manufactured homes and low-income housing, while there was a lot of homes there that were lost, there was still some infrastructure left, although a lot of it had to be rebuilt. But we're not dealing with the same types of situations that we're dealing with the Beachy Creek and Lions Head fire up in the Detroit Lake area. So some of the work that we've done, and Bill, I don't know if you had a chance to show your presentation here in the last few days, but I love his presentation and how it shows the debris flows around Detroit Lake. But we've tried to work closely with Detroit and with the state of Oregon, with Dogami, Oregon Department of Forestry, Oregon State Fire Marshal, the insurance division out of DCBS. We're trying to get a team together to look at it holistically as the state of Oregon. There's already rebuilding that's going on up in Detroit, but those are some real challenges that we're faced with. I'm going to spare the time on the articles. I wanted to get down to Lane County in the Blue River area is actually quite similar. We actually have one project that we're still working on, a fish hatchery with Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it's kind of with debris flows, but also with the rivers and the streams. We have one fish hatchery that was built in a certain location based on the canopy to protect the fish, and now that area of the river is no longer, may not be functional to have a fish hatchery. So we're using federal dollars, a lot of federal dollars coming in, but one of the things what we're looking at with that particular location is we may have to move the entire fish hatchery to make it viable. It's easier to do when you're dealing with government property and government land and state agencies than it is to get into the Detroit and the Blue River area and have known hazards and have to move folks along. There was a couple sliders here, but So I will play this and just kind of let it run for a minute, and then I'll talk real quickly about some of the things that I hope that we can change as we move into rewriting our disaster recovery plan. This is the Halls Ridge Tower. It's out in Marion County. A lot of emergency communications equipment on it, including a camera that lasted quite a while. But the Halls Ridge area went up in smoke, and we lost this tower, and in losing the tower, we lost a lot of communication capability up in the canyon. Post-fire, we utilized name your cellular company. I'm not going to name one because I'd have to name them all, but name the cellular company. They have cells on wheels. We call them cows. But basically, it's trailers and trucks that they just haul out into a community and set up cellular towers. And we used that probably for about a year up in the Blue River area and up in the canyon there to just have emergency communication set up. But these fires just went through and just destroyed everything really, really quick, and it didn't matter. It did not discriminate by any means. One of the things that we're looking at right now is we have 10 after-action reviews that we're doing just on the recovery piece. How we were able to coordinate with local jurisdictions to get the information and the money and the recovery operations that they needed, not only right off the bat to begin to stabilize, but also to rebuild. And then the state is organized in 7 state recovery functions, and it's just really a way that we organize all state operations so that we are working in sync as the state of Oregon and not a bunch of 140 different agencies running different directions. The other thing we had to do was organize the tremendous amount of federal support. We probably had 40 to 50 different federal agencies that came in. And so through Oregon Emergency Management, my role is as really monitoring and guiding all state and federal resources. We ended up putting together what we called an integrated strategic recovery team and an integrated strategic recovery plan, which we ran for probably about 18 months to 2 years. We still have, with the 2020 wildfires, disaster case management grants. We have direct housing, the FEMA trailers, and we have several local rebuilding programs. I just got briefed on them this morning that are still going on to kind of rebuild communities, and it's everywhere from rivers, streams, parkways, homes, economic recovery. And to give you a concept of what recovery from disasters looks like for the Oregon Department of Emergency Management, for all of you older folks that might remember the Vernonia floods from 2007, we closed the books on that one event, one county in 2019. We will be running recovery operations for the 2020 wildfires well into the 2050s. And when I say that, I'm like, is that even a real year? 2050. Couple things that we're doing, and I didn't have a PowerPoint. I figured I'd just talk through it and see if there's any questions. Here's some things that we got jammed up on, and part of what we got jammed up on is the smart people that are here in this room. We didn't get to the table soon enough. The hazards that are associated with wildfires, floods, landslides, ice storms, loss of vegetation. There's a ton of information. What I've learned is there's a ton of information out there that we should bring to the table as we begin recovery operations while we're still fighting the threat. Because those assessments take a long time, but there's already a lot of good information out there. The work that Tagami did and overlaid it with the Department of Forestry and overlaid it with, I think, some other work Tagami did showed that we could use historical data and start predicting what that looks like as far as federal dollars coming in, where we put federal dollars and state dollars, and really getting to the communities, the survivors, to help guide them on what they need to do to rebuild. One of the things we were trying to do, which of all things, we had a great plan with the Army Corps of Engineers to come in and do an assessment. They were going to do it for free, and it was going to be ahead of the work that Tagami was leading through a FEMA grant. And just as we were ready to embark on that, to do some rapid assessments to get some good information, the Ukraine war broke out, and the Army Corps of Engineers said, we're stopping that project. We might have to do other stuff. So even the Ukraine war has a reach, the devastation over there, but it impacted how we were doing recovery operations in Oregon. But that information is there. And if any of you are involved in any way, shape, or form with emergency management, or you have an opportunity, or there's a disaster in your neighborhood or in your jurisdiction, do what you can to engage, because we really weren't focused on how the land was going to come back probably until September of 21, December of 2021. And in hindsight being 2020 and lessons learned, I probably could have had a team on that in February of 2021, probably less than 6 months. So when we actually got through the threat and got to that end of that disaster period or that threat period, we could have been well ahead of where we're at today. And we could have found some additional funding, some direct federal assistance to do some of that work. To give you an idea of the money that's coming in, what we manage at Oregon Department of Emergency Management right now is we have currently 9 open disasters for recovery operations around the state. One of those is COVID. The rest of them are wildfires, ice storms, and floods. But the estimate I got yesterday was probably about $2 billion in federal relief will come through our agency and out to local jurisdictions, not only for recovery, but for hazard mitigation. We've got several hazard mitigation programs in our initial plan in Detroit, and we're still going to continue forward working with our partners at DECAMI and Oregon Department of Forestry, is where do we have those potential debris flows and what mitigation hazards or what mitigation techniques can be put in place to mitigate the hazards. It's something that we've really never embarked on at Oregon Department of Emergency Management, but it is a place we have to go. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I could probably go into details for days about how those fires impacted the state and how we are changing our direction forward. But our takeaway is one, our next disaster recovery plan that we write, we wrote it in 2014, 2015, and it was based on theory, and we were thinking about Cascadia subduction zone. The 2020 wildfires is about as close as we can get, I think, to a Cascadia subduction zone for some of those communities. And we're rewriting it based on practice and lessons learned now. So one of the things that I definitely will have is my friend Bill Burns, front and center with a chapter in there on how we engage DECAMI, ODOT, and all of the other organizations that can do those land assessments rapidly right after a wildfire or during the wildfires using LIDAR and all the other technology that I apparently can't master. So I'll leave it there. I know I'm in between us and lunch, so any questions? All right, thanks.
Hi. One thing that I've been thinking about and know nothing about but fascinates me is that 2 days ago we heard a lot from ecologists who are thinking about the forest. What's its process to turn back time, maybe regrow old growth, which could take hundreds of years. You know, thinking about what might have been here in the 1400 fires or the 1700 fires. One thing I haven't heard anything about, and like I said, know nothing about myself, is on the human side, I haven't heard anything about tribal individuals. Or is there an opportunity in rebuilding communities or in lands where, frankly, colonist descent is now leaving those properties? What can we do as an opportunity to maybe give some lands back to tribal members, or think about how the human story goes back before 1850? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Not thoughts specific to that, but we do have 9 tribal nations in the state of Oregon. Some of the fires that we were dealing with were on tribal land and moved off of tribal land.
Tribal land at one point, though.
You are exactly right. All of this was tribal land at one point. We don't work in the world of land use per se of giving it back or anything along those lines. We stay more focused on the land use related to life and property. That's always a good thought and a good discussion, but that's nothing that we address post disaster. So I don't have a lot of thoughts on it, I guess is what I'm saying. But good point. Yes.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about is the networks that form following disasters like these and how they kind of organically come together. And I think this group represents some of those efforts. How do you maintain those kinds of networks that need to
Yeah, that is a lot of work, and even with disaster recovery, that's the world that I live in. My counterpart, the other deputy director and the division director of response and operations, you know, they take on the threat, we clean up afterwards. But usually after we're done cleaning up, I mean, most people don't realize we're still very much involved in recovery from fires 3 years ago. A lot of coordination and a lot of exercising. One of the things that we're doing is those 10 after-action reviews. And those after-action reviews are how did we come together? This was the first activation of our disaster recovery plan. And we actually had to really think out of the box. We were fortunate that a lot of good people came in, but we're continuing to learn lessons with what we're doing in the recovery operation. One of the after-action reviews is going to be specific of how the state and federal partners interacted with local jurisdictions. And there's also some potential legislative work of how we fund local jurisdictions a little better. But what we do as a network in our steady state, in our reorganization, I've been able to use a couple positions that do nothing but work with local jurisdictions and work with our sister agencies to maintain that continuity now, make sure we learn the lessons that we needed to learn, and build those relationships in advance. If we don't, we're going to fall on our face. I always say I live in Central Oregon. Nathan Garibay is the emergency manager in Deschutes County. I want our organization, when Deschutes County has a problem, I want them to help Nathan. I don't want them to help Deschutes County. I want the relationships that tight in advance, and we work really hard to do that. But that's critical to anything we do. Anything, one way in the back, and then yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious, as part of these after-action reviews, do you take a deeper look at the ignition factors, lead use, and is there feedback then to utilities, or, you know, a lot of the fires were not started by lightning, even portions of the city and county was the lightning ignition. So is there kind of a synthesis of the cause of the fires and working with utilities to help them shut down the grid?
Yes, and that's a good question, and love the bureaucracy of government. The after-action reviews that we're looking at are disaster recovery. We've done after-action reviews on the response efforts, and we've actually, ODOT did a few after-action reviews on how they manage debris cleanup and hazard tree removal. When we have a fire, there's an investigation. Oregon State Fire Marshal, Oregon Department of Forestry, they work through that investigation. If it's determined to be a utility company, of course, there's all kinds of stuff that happens with that I don't even want to get involved in. But those are looked at. You will find or hear of what is power safety or public safety power shutoffs, PSPSs. They're a lot more common now. I would say a lot of that stemmed from the Camp Fire down in Paradise. That's after that, we were really starting to be impacted with them. When we hit the wind events, September 5th, 6th, and 7th of 2020, we were deer in the headlights. We knew we had wildfires that were burning on BLM lands that we couldn't get access to, that the federal government, it was too risky to get access to, saw the straight line wind events, and it was deer in the headlights. We had an idea it could get bad. Those investigations continue on, and working with utility companies of how to prevent that. Right now, the answer has been public safety power shutoffs. I personally would like to see more going into infrastructure and securing that. The other things that we do, Lane County Electric actually has a huge project that we're working through our public assistance programs with FEMA, and they are, with the funds that we got post-wildfire 2020, undergrounding 110 miles of power grid to prevent that type of ignition source in the future. So we do look at it and does get done. The problem is some of these projects take years and years and years to materialize.
One more.
Okay.
You made a comment earlier that had struck a chord with me about data sharing between state agencies, and I guess for those of us who are involved in maintaining programmatic data, what
Okay, so the data that would be useful is all of it. Really, in a nutshell. Data sharing is huge, and when you say data sharing, it really depends on the discipline that you're looking at. We have data sharing problems when we're dealing with survivors. When we were first running into the 2020 wildfires, myself, two other people, and our GIS guru, Daniel Stolb, we found out just doing damage assessments. FEMA, the Red Cross, the Oregon State Fire Marshal, and local jurisdictions all did damage assessments differently, and those damage assessments feed into a presidential declaration. So one of the things that we've worked on is standardizing the data that's needed. And I think beyond data sharing, it's getting all of the smart people in the room that deal with those types of data and determine how it can be standardized and not over-standardized to where it's not worth anything. But what are the critical factors that we need that can be collected by an individual out in the community, and it'll immediately feed in to the enterprise data that we need to manage an entire disaster operation. And when you think about all of the data from GIS to personal hospital, road closures, impacts on septic systems, water systems, it just comes from all directions, and it's almost impossible to manage. We have focused on streamlining the damage assessments, and we now have a tool on our website to where individuals after a wildfire can go out with their phone, download an app. It's the 123, whatever that is, I can't remember. It's that platform, but they can start collecting that data in their neighborhoods, feed that into the county, it feeds to the state, and if we have an event like 2020, the data that we're getting from Jackson County is the same data that we're getting from Clackamas County, and that helps us expedite any emergency declaration requests that we need to turn on and move forward. And the sooner we can do that, and the sooner, especially with a presidential declaration, we can get that document signed by the president, the faster we have federal resources flowing into the state to help. It's a good question. There really isn't an answer for it right now, but it needs a ton of work. I would say it's probably, data management is probably one of the most significant gaps we have in emergency management right now. Nothing else. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks.